with me now. Go with me now. I'm gonna take you down. Go with me now. I'm gonna show you how. Go with me now.
So this is lesson 1-3D. Welcome. I guess to warm up, and by the way, this will be a quick lecture, but it follows everything that is in our pre-printed notes. So you can follow along, stop it if you need to, speed it up, whatever you feel like doing, as long as you get the information, because you're still responsible for the information. Alright, so we're going to warm up. It says here to draw a market graph for monster drinks. That means supply and demand, and then show what would happen to the equilibrium price and quantity if it were discovered that people got smarter by drinking energy drinks. So I'm going to go ahead and do this. Get my dark blue. Alright, so whenever something says draw a market graph, it means you need to draw a supply curve and a demand curve. Okay, and this one happens to be for monster drinks. Okay, so it says show what would happen if it were discovered that people got smarter by drinking energy drinks. So hey, if they're going to make you smarter, do you want to go ahead and drink one? Absolutely. So the demand curve is going to increase, and that is going to drive the price higher and the equilibrium quantity to be greater as well. Now, I didn't really skip ahead, but I sort of did. I want to remind you, here is, I'm going to call that point A. That is the original equilibrium that told us what the original price was and the original quantity. Okay? When the demand curve shifted to the right, it created a second equilibrium, and that equilibrium is at a higher price, so we got P2, and a greater quantity. Okay? Now that's a review from the demand shifters segment that we learned about. Next, it says now suppose the government increases taxes on the production of energy drinks. Well, we learned that when the government raises taxes on a producer, the supply curve is going to shift to the left. Okay? And so the supply curve shifted left, and now we have a third equilibrium at point C, and now the price has gone even higher. The quantity is kind of hard to judge, but I guess the way I just drew it, it looks like it went down from quantity 2. Anyway, what the point of today is that we are going to examine how prices and quantities in a market are going to change based upon changes in supply and demand, and so that's why we had to learn supply and demand in order to do all this. So let's get started. So first things first, some definitions: equilibrium point, equilibrium price, equilibrium quantity. So I think we have already learned what those are, but just in case. Alright, this is some market. Okay, this point right here, that is the equilibrium point. Okay, the equilibrium price is where that point crosses the y-axis. Okay, so the equilibrium price, and then the equilibrium quantity is where that point, if you continue it on, crosses the x-axis. So that is what we mean by equilibrium point, the equilibrium price, the equilibrium quantity. And of course, as we just demonstrated before, if either the demand or the supply curve move, you get a new equilibrium point. Okay? So, next thing we're going to do. We need to figure out what is it that actually causes shortages, because a lot of people are going to say, and you're probably thinking this as I ask the question, you're probably thinking the reason we have shortages is because there's not enough of something. And that simply isn't the case. And so in our example here, there's only one tree, so that is true. However, a shortage just means that the quantity supplied is less than the quantity demanded. So there's two ways to alleviate a shortage. One would be to increase the supply, one would be to decrease the demand. But the thing is, we're not actually going to do that. Instead, to alleviate a shortage, we're going to change the price. So imagine these dogs, instead of all lining up to pee on the tree for free, what if we were charging them $10 each? Would there still be this many dogs in line? Or do you think maybe the line wouldn't be so long? Well, that's kind of an insight as to what causes a shortage. Okay? It's when the price is set too low, you get a shortage. Alright? And by the way, if the price is set too high, you get what's called a surplus. All right, so let's examine shortages and surpluses. We're going to examine the rollout of the Sabre Arrowhead phone. Okay, so the Arrowhead phone is an ergonomic smartphone of the future, and as you can see by our graph, the price of it should be, now I said should be, $199. Okay, the problem is that when you roll out a new product, you don't know what the actual supply and the demand are, or how they work together and come up with an equilibrium price. So let's pretend that we roll the phone out at a really low price of $99. Okay, at that $99 price, we're going to get a quantity supplied. Okay, because if the company figures they're selling it for $99, they're going to devote X amount of resources toward the production of it, and in this case, it'd be 4,000 phones. Okay, and then we carry the price along to the demand curve, and we get a quantity demanded. Okay, so at $99, the quantity supplied is 4, and the quantity demanded is 11. So that means since the quantity demanded is greater than the quantity supplied, it's 11 versus 4, that means we have a shortage of 7,000 units because the quantity supplied is less than what is demanded. And so in that case, we would expect the price to rise to a point where it'll reach that equilibrium. And at equilibrium, the quantity supplied and the quantity demanded are equal. Okay? Now let's pretend for a second that instead Sabre rolled it out at $5.99. That's a little more competitive with the iPhone, isn't it? Now at $5.99, does that look right? No, my bad. I put those dots to the wrong number. Let's put them down here to this 2. Alright, so at $5.99 the quantity demanded will equal 2. Okay, we carry the price on over here to the supply curve, and the quantity supplied is 12. Okay, now Sabre has a whole bunch of phones left over at that price because only 2,000 are sold, but they've got 12,000. So in this case we have what's called a surplus, and that is equal to 10,000. Alright, you just take the 12 and subtract the 2. So that's kind of how you would examine shortages and surpluses on a market graph. Anytime the price is not at equilibrium, you're going to have either a surplus or a shortage. Okay, so we've already defined these. Okay, the shortage is when quantity demanded is greater than quantity supplied, and that will occur anytime the price is below equilibrium. To rectify a shortage, the price will rise over time so that it does achieve equilibrium. Alright, and the reason it does that is well, it's basic human nature. If you want this thing and there's a shortage of it, you will tend to bid the price higher, and so over time the price will go up, and suppliers will see that buyers are willing to pay more, so they'll raise the price, and eventually there will become an equilibrium. Okay, surplus, it's the opposite. This is when the quantity supplied is greater than the quantity demanded. This occurs at any price above equilibrium, and over time, because of the inner workings of consumers and producers, the price will fall toward equilibrium. Now, why does the price fall? Well, with the example of the Sabre phone, they've got 10,000 extra Sabre phones that they can't sell at $5.99. So how are they going to get rid of them? They're going to have to lower the price, and so that's why the price will fall over time. All right, let's do another example. Here we have pig's feet. All right, in this market, y'all know that the price of pig's feet should be $10, and at that price they should sell 500 feet. What a deal. Alright, what if the price were set at $5? Okay, now you can examine this, and now you see that the quantity supplied is 250 and the quantity demanded is 750. So that means we would have a shortage of 500. Okay, so this area here, that is the shortage. Okay, And if the price were set at $15, you would have a surplus. Why is it a surplus? Because now the quantity demanded is 250 and the quantity supplied is 750. So 750 is bigger than 250, so there'd be a surplus of 500. Okay, so that's just a little, interesting thing about supply and demand and how the forces in the market are going to set a price where all the consumers are going to be satisfied and all the producers are going to sell everything. Okay, that's not always the case. Alright, so what we're going to do now is just practice. Okay, so the only new thing for today was surpluses and shortages, so we have covered that. However, when you come to class next time, we're going to take a quiz, and the quiz is basically going to be, well, it's like what you see on this page right now. Alright, you're given, in this case, 3 scenarios, and those 3 scenarios you have to draw a market graph to demonstrate what is happening in those 3 scenarios. So let's go ahead and get our graph drawn and labeled. So this is oil, and I've got supply and demand, but I don't have quantity and I didn't have price. So now it's labeled properly. So our first example says the US increases production through hydraulic fracturing technology. So we have learned in this class that through increased technology you get increased supply. So we increase the supply curve, and now we have a new equilibrium at a lower price and a greater quantity. Okay? Pretty cool, right? Number 2. Number 2 says the Chinese economy has slowed down and they have decreased their consumption of energy. So that means they're not going to use as much oil, and so that happens to affect the demand. So the demand curve shifts to the left, and let's ignore the previous supply curve and say our new equilibrium's there. Okay? So the price falls and the quantity decreases. Now on your notes, these are 3 separate graphs. Okay, I don't know why I did this to where it's all on one, but that's okay, we won't get confused. Number 3, a destruction of ISIS-held oil fields. Well, in a war, sometimes things get destroyed, and when they get destroyed, there's not as much of it. So the supply curve shifts to the left. And we get a new equilibrium where there is a higher price and less quantity. Alright, so that's the first 3. We've got them down. Let's look at the next one. Alright, so here's a situation where we're looking at the equilibrium price and quantity of Papa John's pizza. But then, all of a sudden, you see Peyton Manning's glorious forehead on the screen, and he's endorsing Papa John's, and so what do you go out and do? You got to go out and buy those Papa John's pizza. So the demand shifts to the right, and that causes the price to go higher and the equilibrium quantity to increase. Now note, if the price didn't go higher, if it stayed at $6, okay? If it stayed at $6, the quantity demanded would be greater than the quantity supplied, and there would be a shortage. And so that's why the price has to rise. So whenever demand goes up, the price has to go up. If demand falls, the price has to go down. Otherwise, you get shortages and surpluses. Alright, here's an example where we're looking at the market for deodorant, and it says here that people want to smell more natural. Well, I don't know about you, but I have smelled people in their natural state, and I personally don't like it, but according to this scenario, people do like it. So what's going to happen to the demand for deodorant? That's right, it's going to decrease. And so we show it decreasing, and then we also show that the price falls because we have a new equilibrium. We were at A, now we're at B. B is at a lower price and a lower quantity than A was. Alright? Next, we have donuts. So we're looking at new technology in donut production. Which curve is going to be affected? I think you already know. It's the supply curve. Okay? And so the supply increases, it shifts to the right. That means donuts are going to cost less, and we're going to buy more and they're going to sell more. And that's why the quantity also increases. Alright? Next, the invention of the smartphone affects the flip phone market. Alright, so Dwight has given us some information, and he's telling us the rumor, which is false, no one cool owns a flip cell phone. So what's going to happen to the demand for flip phones if people don't like them anymore? That is correct. The demand is going to decrease. And that means the price has to fall. And the quantity at equilibrium is going to decrease as well. All right? So one of the things I've noticed over the years is that sometimes people are not recognizing that point A is at a higher price and a greater quantity than point B. So just remember that point is that point because of these coordinates. It's because of that price and that quantity. And so when the demand curve shifts to the left, you get a new point, which is a lower price and a lower quantity. So always, if you're confused, always check out where the point is coming from as far as the y-axis and the x-axis. Okay? Next, we're looking at the effect of income on people's desire to buy what I guess is the normal good, the Kylie Jenner's lip kit. I personally think this is somewhat abnormal, but that's not an economic term. So, instead, when parents give their teenage girls way too much money, we're going to show the demand to increase. And that's going to drive the price higher, and there's going to be a greater quantity at equilibrium as well. All right. I think we got one more, and then we look at some more complicated things. All right, so I'll give you a little information here. The information is that this rare metal indium is crucial in the production of the iPhone screen, and the rare metal is mined in China. Well, if Japan and China went to war, it would disrupt that mining process because the country would be busy with other things. So, if there's less indium, what happens to the market for iPhones? Well, indium's a resource that goes into the production, so the supply would decrease. And when the supply decreases, we're all going to have to pay more. Okay? And we won't buy as many. So that's why you see the price go up and the quantity at equilibrium will go down. Alright, so the next thing we're going to do, so I told you we're going to shift gears a little bit, make it slightly more complicated, but not too much. Alright? And that is the idea that both curves can shift. Okay, you could have two things happen that affect a market. And so I've got two things here that are affecting the gasoline market. All right, number one, first of all, gasoline is made from oil. So if the price of oil increases, that means refiners are not going to be able to purchase as much oil, and so there would be a decrease in the supply of gasoline. All right. And at the same time, number two is happening. India's and China's growing middle classes increase their purchases of cars. If you buy a car, what do you got to fill it up with? That's right, gasoline. So there's going to be an increase in demand for gasoline. Now this is the part that I want to make sure is clear. Alright? If those two things happen simultaneously, we move to a new equilibrium. We move from A to B. Okay? When you move from A to B, you definitely can see a higher price. But what about the quantity? Can you really tell what's going on with the quantity? You really can't. So we would say the quantity in this case is indeterminate. Okay? Or you might see the word uncertain. Okay? So if this was on a test, an answer choice would be, the correct answer choice would be, when these two things happen, the price of gasoline will go higher, or it will definitely go higher, and the quantity of gasoline sold is uncertain. It may go higher, it may go lower, it may stay exactly the same. The point is this: when two curves shift, one of our variables is definitely going to change, and the other one is an uncertain change. And so we'll do another demonstration, okay? Now, we're going to do more of those examples. This is one, but I'm adding a third layer of complexity to this. And put a star next to this stuff, because you're going to see a question like this on your test. And what we're going to end up doing is we're going to use these two functions. Okay, we've got a demand function and a supply function, and we're going to use those to determine what exactly is the equilibrium price and quantity for Cuban cigars in this case. All right. So before I forget, let me label my graph. Okay, I've got price, supply, demand, quantity. All right. What I need y'all to know is that at this point, that equilibrium right there, the quantity demanded is equal to the quantity supplied. That means these two equations we have, we can just set them equal to each other. Okay? And then we can solve for P. And then once we get P, we can plug the price into the two functions and get the quantities. Alright, so let's see. If I take 10 away from both sides, I get 40. And if I take a P away, well, if I add a P to both sides, I get 2P. So that means price in this market is $20. So the equilibrium price over here is $20. Now, what's the equilibrium quantity? Well, what if I add 20 to 10? That's right, I get 30. Okay? Let's check our work. If I plug my P in over here, what's 50 minus 20? It's also 30. So it seems to work. Okay, we did it right. Now, that's how you do that. That's how you calculate the equilibrium price and quantity given a demand function and in a supply function. So don't forget, set them equal to each other, and then you can calculate for price and quantity. Now we're going to move some curves on the graph. It says what would happen to the equilibrium price and quantity of Cuban cigars in the U.S. if the government opened up trade with Cuba. Well, if we open up trade with Cuba, they're going to end up selling more cigars here in the United States, right? So we would say the supply definitely is going to increase. All right? At the same time, though, due to, health scares and whatnot, more people quit smoking. So what's going to happen to the demand for these cigars? It's going to decrease. Okay? So once again, both curves shifted, and in this example, our new equilibrium is down here. Okay, so we went from A to B, and the price definitely fell, but the quantity at equilibrium was uncertain or indeterminate. We don't know. Okay? So again, put a star next to this. You're going to see that again, okay? Alright, let's do two more examples, and then I want you to work on the practice free response. Okay?
I'm Chiquita Banana, and I've come to say bananas have to ripen in a certain way, and when
that's
they're
right, they do.
flecked with brown and
I
have
hate
a golden
green
hue,
ones. Don't you guys
bananas
hate
taste
green
the
ones?
best and
Terrible. Alright, so here's the supply and demand for bananas, and we see two things happening. Number one, there's a hurricane in Central America. That's going to wipe out the bananas, so the supply curve shifts left. Okay? At the same time, we find out that bananas are really good for you. They're heralded as a superfood, and so the demand increases. Our new equilibrium is right up here. Okay, so we went from A to B. The price definitely went up. Quantity stays the same. Or it's indeterminate, or it's uncertain. Alright, let's check out the next one. Do you see that squirrel? That squirrel is what we call a patriotic squirrel. Okay? Alright, so we have our two curves. We've got supply and demand, and we got two things happening. Number one, patriotism surges after 9/11, and so even squirrels want flags. So the demand is going to increase for flags, and we're told that fabric costs go down. So flags are made from fabric, so that means that flag producers can buy more of the fabric, and so they can make more flags, so the supply increases. And now we have a new equilibrium. So we went from point A to point B, and we would say the quantity this time definitely increases, but we're kind of like uncertain about price. Okay? Maybe it stays the same, maybe it goes up, maybe it goes down. There's really no way of knowing, okay? Because we don't move our curves with precision. We make qualitative changes, meaning we know it shifts right, or we know it shifts left, but we don't know how far, okay? So that's why in this case we don't know what happened to the price, but the quantity definitely increased. Alright, so this is what I want you to do, and we'll go over this in class, okay? I want you to go through the scenarios involving these products, which, if you look at them, you've got some substitutes, you've got some complements, you've got some resources that go into the production, you get all kinds of things changing. And so basically I want y'all, well, just follow the directions. Okay, you're gonna change the market for apple bottom jeans, and as a result of that price change, Maybe now people are changing their purchases of sweatpants and boots with the fur and all that other stuff. I want you to figure that out as best you can, and then bring them to class ready to go over it. Alright? Anyway, that's all we got, and I hope you enjoy your day. Make sure you have done the necessary studying for a possible quiz. Thanks.